The next transport arrived unannounced. A cold, drizzly morning when the train was usually only carrying freight. Ada heard the whistle and felt the old instinct rise, the pull of the platform. But when she got there, she saw it wasn't a transport of fresh troops. It was a hospital train, filled with makeshift bunks and the low moans of wounded men. Stretchers were being offloaded, men in rough, stained blankets, faces grimed with the dust of distant places. Ada stood frozen. This was the real war, stripped of the clean uniforms and the hopeful send-offs. There were no mothers here, only tired medical staff and the smell of iodine and iron. A young man, his eyes bandaged, was being carried past her. His lips parched and cracked. The urge to offer a kiss, a small comfort, rose fiercely, but Ada stopped herself. What would it mean now? A final goodbye before a hospital bed? A promise of home to a man who had lost the ability to see it? She lowered her head and did not move forward. She kept her hands clasped tightly, refusing to violate the profound silence of their suffering with her foolish, hopeful gesture. She simply stood by and watched the procession of pain, and in that moment, she finally understood that her ritual was not about the soldiers at all. It was always about her own desperate need for control, her own fear of an unmoored future, and the sheer vanity of believing her lips held the power of a goddess. The train was filled with men who had seen too much to care about a fleeting kiss. Ada didn't leave the platform for a long time after the hospital train departed. The silence was different this time, not a silence of missing, but a silence of deep, humbling respect for the sacrifice she had witnessed. She walked home, and only then did she sit down on her porch swing and take out the small, jagged piece of metal Clay had given her. She had carried it for years, believing it was the key to their future, the magical half that would complete the whole upon his return. Now she looked at it with clear eyes. It was not a half dog tag which would have been stamped and clean. This piece was rough, hammered, clearly broken off a larger, perhaps symbolic piece of metal. It looked ancient, almost like a piece of a charm or a crude shield. A talisman, perhaps, to ward off bad luck. But then, a thought struck her. A cold, horrifying whisper that came straight from the subconscious accessed in her fevered dream. What if Clay hadn't given her the half of his promise? What if he had given her the half of her own? The thought twisted in her gut. He had recognized the weight of her ritual, and instead of giving her a promise, he had given her a warning, a jagged, sharp piece of reality. He had left her with a half-promise, perhaps his own way of saying, "Don't wait for a whole return, Ada." She took the leather cord from her neck and locked the small, cold item away in a wooden box, beneath her mother's silver thimble. The waiting was over. Silas noticed the change in Ada immediately. She was quieter, yes, but the strained, watchful look had left her eyes. She moved with a purpose that wasn't tied to the train schedule. He found her one afternoon painting her porch railing a deep, peaceful blue. He didn't ask her about Clay or the kisses. He simply picked up a discarded brush and started working on the trim, side by side with her. They painted in silence for nearly an hour, the rhythmic sweep of the brushes the only sound. It was the most intimate connection they had shared in years. This was Silas's love. Patient, present, and demanding nothing in return. He offered stability without asking for a commitment, a quiet strength that was the opposite of the dramatic, high-stakes promise of the depot. Ada watched him, his brow furrowed in concentration, the sun glinting off his dark hair. She realized that the love she had been waiting for was a violent, heroic thing, a love that would return triumphant from the mouth of hell. But the love standing right next to her was the quiet, sustaining kind, the kind that simply endured the drought and kept painting the porch, waiting for the rain. She understood that a steady heart was sometimes a greater victory than a glorious return. The simple reality of Silas's presence was a balm to her soul, a quiet counter-narrative to the grand, tragic epic she had been living. The town, however, saw Ada's change of heart and associated it with the slow, creeping misfortune that had been plaguing Willow Creek. The drought had worsened, the creek was barely a trickle, and the crops were stunted and yellowed. People, driven by fear and ancient superstition, began to whisper again. But this time, they weren't calling her a fool. They were blaming her for the lack of rain. She stopped the kisses, broke the good luck cycle. Old Mr. Peterson grumbled to anyone who would listen. She put the goodbyes on hold, and now the world itself is on hold, drying up. It was a crazy, fearful logic, but it took root in the desperate heat. They believed the constant flow of Ada's promises, the tears, the hope, the contact, had kept a certain metaphysical balance in the town, a payment to the war gods or the river spirits, and now that the payment had stopped, the spirits were demanding tribute from the land itself. Ada heard the whispers, and they hurt less than Martha's confession, because they were rooted in madness, not malice. Yet, she felt the pressure, the sheer weight of a small town's need for a scapegoat. The drought was a terrible external conflict, forcing her to confront whether her personal choice to stop the ritual was truly damaging the community she had sought to protect. One sweltering afternoon, Granny May, the town's ancient oracle who knew every root and every rumor, sat on Ada's porch. She was not accusing. She was telling a story. "Child," Granny May rasped, sipping her tea. "There's an old river tale about a girl who promised the River King her whole heart for safe passage of her man. But the king, he was a jealous spirit, and he said, 'I'll only take half. You must keep the other half open, always bleeding, always waiting. If he comes back, it's mine. If he stays gone, it's yours.' That half-heart promise is what binds you, child. That cold, jagged thing you hold, that ain't clay's burden. It's the price of the half-heart you kept waiting. The price is paid in the slow passing of the seasons, the drying up of the spirit, and the lack of rain. You have to decide if you want to keep waiting for the king to claim his share, or if you want to claim your own whole heart back and send that half-token down to the bottom of the thirsty creek." Granny May's words were chillingly specific, hitting too close to the mark of Clay's jagged token. The tale forced Ada to confront the magical thinking that underpinned her life. Her ritual was not just a social act. It had become a contract with something far older and far more demanding than the military. The test was to break that magical contract and choose freedom over fate. The test came quickly. A tiny boy, hardly more than 18, with huge, terrified eyes, was leaving on the afternoon train. His mother, Mrs. Jennings, was sobbing hysterically. She saw Ada watching from the far edge of the platform. Desperate, she rushed over, grabbing Ada's hands. "Please, Ada. Please, child. You're the keeper of the goodbyes. He's my only boy, my last hope. Please, just one kiss. Don't let him leave without your promise." The request was a knife in Ada's spirit. To kiss him was to submit to the town's madness and to her own broken ritual. It was to make another half-promise, consigning another boy to the limbo of her uncertain fate. To refuse was to break the mother's heart, to accept the role of the town's curse, and to deny the one thing Ada had ever been good at. Ada looked at the young soldier, his face white with fear, and she saw Clay's face overlaid on his. She took a deep breath, and with a terrible, shaking certainty, she said, "No, Mrs. Jennings, I cannot. That ritual is finished. The best luck you can give your son is not a kiss, but the strength to know you'll live your life fully while he's gone. You need to kiss him goodbye as his mother, not as a desperate hope. That is the true strength he needs." The refusal was harder than all the waiting. The mother collapsed into tears, and the town watched, silent and stunned. The train pulled away without Ada's benediction, and she had finally, truly, kissed goodbye to the past. The evening after the refusal, Martha came back to Ada's porch, this time with a small, worn photograph. She sat down, her usual severity replaced by a rare, heartbreaking vulnerability. "I told you folks thought you were a curse, Ada, but I didn't tell you why I knew the pressure they were putting on you." She showed Ada the photo. A smiling young man in a uniform, handsome and full of life. "This was Thomas. He left 10 years ago before your ritual started. I loved him, but I was shy, foolish, and too proud to stand on that depot and make a fool of myself. I told myself he would come back because he loved me, Martha, not because of a silly kiss. He never came back. Not a single letter, not a single word. And every day since, I've wondered if just one moment of courage, one simple act of faith like yours, would have given him that tiny thread of hope to hold on to. Martha swallowed hard, tears finally gathering in her sharp eyes. I hated your ritual, Ada, because I thought you were tempting fate with what I was too scared to do. But I was wrong. It's not about the luck, honey. It's about the memory. Now that you've broken the spell for the town, break it for yourself. Let go of the need for him to return to prove you right. Just live, Ada. Live a whole life for yourself. Not a half-life for a promise made on a train platform. The confession from Martha was the final turning point. It wasn't the town's judgment, or the minister's sermon, or the drought, but the quiet, shared tragedy of a woman who had chosen not to kiss goodbye. Ada took out the jagged metal piece that Clay had given her. It felt cold, inert, just a piece of scrap metal now, stripped of its magical significance. She sat with it for hours, turning it over and over. She finally understood. The kiss was not the promise of return. The kiss was the beautiful, final, perfect goodbye, a moment of wholeness before destruction. It was her gift to the soldiers. A clean slate, a final piece of sweetness, so that whatever hell they faced, they wouldn't leave home with regret, but with a happy memory. Clay, with his sad, knowing eyes, had seen her and given her a piece of metal that symbolized her half-life, the half she was holding back. His gift wasn't a tether to him. It was a physical symbol of the part of herself she was sacrificing. Ada finally let go of the obligation. She realized the soldier she was waiting for was not the only destiny available to her. She put the token back in the box and felt a vast, profound emptiness, quickly followed by the exhilarating rush of freedom. She was no longer the girl who kissed goodbye. She was just Ada. The first thing Ada did was call for Silas. Not with desperation, but with calm certainty. "Silas," she said when he answered the door. "I've got too much room in this house and I need a change. I need to sell the place. I need new dirt under my feet." Silas looked at the house, the old, creaking wood that was saturated with years of perfume, train smoke, and restless waiting. He understood the profound gravity of her decision. The house was her prison, and selling it was her emancipation. He didn't ask her why or if she was finally choosing him. He simply said, "I'll help you find a good buyer, Ada. Someone who can start fresh here." The town watched them, Silas helping Ada pack her meager belongings, dismantle the life that had been defined by the depot. The whispers started again, but they were different now. Not of curses, but of a brave, bewildering change. She was not running from the shame. She was walking toward the future. She kept only the wooden box with Clay's token and her mother's silver thimble. The act of cleaning out the house was a process of purging her soul, removing the dust of years of false hope. She was selling the idea of the returning hero and buying the certainty of a quiet future. The waiting was truly over, and the feeling was both terrifying and utterly, beautifully peaceful. Late autumn brought a cold, wet chill that finally broke the long drought. The sky wept for 3 days and 3 nights, washing the dust off Willow Creek and swelling the river back to a healthy flow. On the 4th day, the sun came out, and an unexpected train whistle blew. Not the high, urgent wail of a troop transport, but a slower, heavier, more weary sound. It was the homecoming train. The last of the boys, the ones who had stayed until the official peace was signed, were finally returning home. Ada felt the old, magnetic pull, but this time it was different. She went to the depot, but she wore a simple, dark dress and carried 2 wicker baskets filled with cold chicken and sweet tea, not the bright, hopeful attire of the ritual. She stood back from the returning crowd, offering sustenance, not salvation. She watched as mothers cried and wives embraced their weary men. It was a scene of quiet, exhausted joy, far removed from the dramatic goodbyes she had presided over. Her new ritual was one of service, of giving comfort without demanding a promise. She was just Ada, a woman of the town, welcoming her neighbor's home. As the crowd thinned, Ada saw him. He was one of the last men off the train, moving slowly, carefully, favoring his left side. His uniform was faded and ill-fitting, and his left sleeve was pinned neatly to his shoulder. He stopped on the dusty platform, his head turning, taking in the small, rain-washed town. Then his eyes, still the color of wet slate, found hers. Clay. He looked older than his years, thinner, and the exhaustion was etched deep into his face. But it was him. The jagged piece of metal tucked away in her box seemed to vibrate with a ghost of its former power. He didn't rush. He simply started walking toward her, slow and steady, crossing the space of time and memory between them. He came to a stop a few feet away, his gaze holding hers. The air crackled with the weight of years of unspoken words, silent promises, and broken dreams. This was the moment of reckoning, the final test of faith and love. The soldier she kissed goodbye had finally, impossibly, returned. But the question was, had he returned for her? Clay stood there, silent for a long moment, the noise of the departing train fading. He finally spoke, his voice rough and used. "Ada, I kept the promise you gave me that day." Ada looked at the missing arm, the deep lines around his eyes. "You gave me something too, Clay. That jagged token. I kept it safe." He smiled then, a tired, weary curve of the lips. "The token," he said. "That was a piece of my shield, Ada. Not a shield from the enemy, but from your kiss. I saw the pure faith in your eyes, and I knew that if I took your whole promise, I'd be bound to come back as a whole man. But I knew I couldn't be whole. So I gave you a piece of scrap, a half-promise, asking you not to wait for a whole man, but for the man who kissed goodbye." He confessed that he hadn't come back for the promise, but to finally release her from it. Ada reached into the pocket of her dress, where she had brought the token, just in case. She pressed the cold metal into his remaining hand. "The ritual is done, Clay. I broke the spell the day I stopped waiting and started living. The soldier I kissed goodbye returned, but the girl who gave that kiss is gone." He nodded slowly, a profound understanding passing between them. Then Silas appeared, walking over with a calm ease, carrying a fresh jug of sweet tea. He stopped by Ada's side, placing a steady hand on her shoulder, a statement of unwavering presence. Clay looked at Silas, saw the quiet strength and the certainty in his eyes, and gave a genuine, full smile, a whole smile that reached his slate-colored eyes. He finally understood that the kiss of destiny had not been a contract of return, but a perfect piece of closure. He had returned to find her free. Ada looked at Clay, then at Silas, and then out toward the town, which now seemed bright and full of possibility, not shadows. The train whistle blew again, but this time, it was a sound of welcome, signaling that the years of waiting were done, and the long, quiet chapter of hello had finally begun.